The forest had always seemed alive, even in the daylight. But tonight, under the sliver of a waning moon, it breathed in a way that made the air heavy, almost suffocating. For friends, Ethan, Claire, Marcus, and Lily had set out for a night hike, laughing nervously as they carried their backpacks and flashlights along the winding trail. The trees stretched like skeletal fingers toward the sky, their branches creaking with the wind in a way that sounded almost like murmured warnings. At first, it was just the usual night sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft scurrying of small animals through underbrush. But soon, a different sound began to weave itself through the ordinary forest symphony. A whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible. Ethan paused, straining his ears. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice tight. Claire shook her head. "It's probably just the wind." But the whispering continued. Low, indistinct at first, it grew gradually clearer, threading through the trees, around them, beneath their feet. It was almost like a voice, but not a human voice. The sound seemed to be calling their names, barely audible, almost coaxing. "Ethan, him here?" His heart skipped a beat. "Did you guys?" He looked at them, his eyes wide, but they shook their heads. Marcus tried to laugh. "Stop messing with us. It's just the wind." But his voice faltered as he, too, heard the faint, drawn-out sound of his own name whispered through the trees. Lily froze, her flashlight trembling in her hands. That's not possible," she whispered. "No one else is here. We're alone. Alone." The word carried a weight now, heavy and chilling. The laughter, the camaraderie, all of it seemed to vanish, swallowed by the darkness. The deeper they walked into the forest, the louder the whispers became, shifting in tone, soft at first, then insistent, pressing closer, as if the trees themselves were leaning toward them. "Ethan, Marcus, Lily." The voices were no longer just sounds. They seemed alive, slithering through the air, brushing against their skin like cold fingers. Every shadow seemed to move of its own accord. Every rustle of leaves became a footstep that was never there when they turned. Ethan gripped Lily's arm. "We should turn back." "No," Marcus said, his teeth clenched. "We're almost at the clearing. We'll rest there for a bit." But the clearing never seemed to arrive. The path twisted unnaturally, the same gnarled trees appearing again and again, as if the forest had rearranged itself. Panic began to set in. Claire's flashlight flickered, sputtering, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed them, and the whispers escalated, overlapping now, calling not just their names but murmuring secrets in voices that sounded eerily like theirs, distorted, mocking. One by one, the friends started to feel it, something brushing against their backs, a cold touch that made their skin crawl. Ethan spun around, swinging his flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. Only the whispering. Then Lily screamed. It came from the darkness ahead, sharp and sudden. The others rushed toward her, but she was gone. The whispering ceased for a brief, terrifying moment, leaving only the sound of their own panicked breathing. "Ethan, Marcus, Claire." They froze. The names were no longer whispers. They were screams, carried from somewhere deep within the forest. The darkness seemed to pulse, to shift around them, and the path behind them had disappeared. The trees had closed in, forming an impenetrable wall of shadow. "We have to stay together," Marcus shouted, but his voice seemed to bounce back at him from 100 directions, distorted, unrecognizable. The whispers resumed, louder, faster, relentless. And then, a figure emerged from the darkness, a shape tall and thin, moving like smoke, its limbs stretching unnaturally. It didn't have a face, and yet it seemed to stare directly at them. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over a root, and when he looked up, Marcus was gone. Just like that, vanished into the blackness as though the forest had swallowed him whole. Claire sobbed, clutching Ethan's arm. "We have to get out. We have to run." But the forest had no end, no exit. The trees whispered in unison now, a chorus of voices echoing through the night. Each word was a promise, a threat, a lie, all at once. "You can't leave. You belong to us. You're one of us now." Ethan held Claire tightly. "We have to stay awake. We can't sleep here. But the forest didn't care. Its whispers wrapped around them, a suffocating, living fog. And in the distance, the faint sound of footsteps, though no one walked near them, kept pace with their panicked racing hearts. Ethan and Claire stumbled blindly through the dense undergrowth, hearts hammering, lungs burning from the effort to flee a path that seemed to vanish behind them. The whispers never stopped. They grew louder, more insistent, like thousands of voices speaking in a language just beyond comprehension. Ethan, Claire, join us. The voices didn't just call their names anymore. They mimicked their voices, their laughter, their cries, twisting them into something grotesque. Ethan clutched his flashlight, shaking it frantically. Each swing illuminated the forest in fleeting flashes, long, thin shadows that seemed to slither and stretch toward them, then vanish as if the darkness itself was swallowing the light. Claire sobbed, gripping his arm. "It's following us," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He could hear Marcus's screams in the whispers, though he knew it was impossible. Marcus had vanished, and yet the forest kept replaying the sound, mocking him. Suddenly, a hand, cold, skeletal, impossibly long, grabbed Claire's shoulder. She screamed, twisting, but there was nothing there. Ethan grabbed her, dragging her forward, but her scream lingered in the air, echoing from the trees themselves. "You cannot escape." Branches whipped at their faces. Roots tore at their ankles. Every step felt like the forest itself was trying to trap them, to crush them in the twisting shadows. And then, through the haze of fear, a familiar voice called. "Lily." Ethan froze. "She can't be here. She's gone. Come to me." The voice was sweet, pleading, and yet layered with something darker, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Against his better judgment, Ethan turned toward the sound. Claire screamed, grabbing his arm, but the forest seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. There was no right or left, only endless trees and endless shadows. A fog began to rise, thick and suffocating, curling around their legs, damp and heavy. Shapes moved inside the fog, humanoid but twisted, their faces smeared and unrecognizable, their eyes glowing faintly. Every time Ethan shone his flashlight on them, they vanished, only to reappear closer, surrounding them. Claire's grip on his arm tightened. We have to keep moving." But the forest wasn't done. The whispers became chanting now, low and rhythmic, pressing into their minds. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence, an awareness, a hunger. Ethan felt it crawling along his skin, inside his chest, in his bones. He wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but his body felt sluggish, weighted, as if the forest itself was holding him back. "Join us, forever." Ethan caught sight of movement ahead. A small clearing, or what seemed like a clearing, but the moonlight revealed nothing but black silhouettes of trees that shouldn't exist. And in the middle of the clearing, a figure crouched, Lily. Or something that looked like her. Her eyes were hollow, dark pits that reflected nothing. She tilted her head unnaturally, as if listening to a sound Ethan couldn't hear. The air around her shimmered, like heat rising from pavement, though the night was cold. Ethan called. But the thing that had once been his friend only smiled, a slow, wrong, inhuman smile, showing teeth that were too sharp, too many. Then it spoke, in a voice that was hers and not hers at the same time. "Why did you leave me?" Claire screamed again, pulling Ethan away, but the forest shifted. Trees moved subtly, closing off their path, and the fog thickened, hiding the ground. Every step forward felt like they were sinking, being swallowed by roots that weren't really there but somehow were. The whispering chorus rose to a deafening pitch. The voices called out in unison. One by one, "All of you." Ethan felt a cold hand close around his ankle. He stumbled, dragging Claire down with him. They rolled, scraping against branches and jagged roots, the whispers now laughter, mocking, cruel. In the darkness, he could see a flicker of movement. Marcus, or what remained of him, twisted, crawling on all fours, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that had no sound. Claire shrieked, covering her face. Ethan tried to pull Marcus away, but it wasn't real. Just a vision, a lure. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, Marcus vanished. The whispering grew louder, angrier, pressing into their minds with the weight of 1,000 unseen hands. They ran blindly, not knowing if they were moving forward or backward. Every familiar landmark had disappeared. The stars were gone, the moon hidden behind impossible black branches. Only the whispers guided them now, calling, teasing, beckoning them towards some inevitable horror. Then Ethan realized, the forest didn't want them to leave. The forest wanted them to belong. And the only way to survive was to become one of its whispers. Claire fell behind. Ethan tried to reach her, but the shadows twisted, forming hands, grabbing her, pulling her into the darkness. Her scream was short, then silence. The whispers shifted, changing tone, satisfied, hungry. Ethan ran alone now. Alone with the whispers. And in the distance, he heard it, the laughter of Lily, Marcus, Claire, or perhaps only the forest pretending. One left. Ethan ran. His lungs burned, his legs screamed in protest, but the forest refused to release him. Every shadow seemed to twist, to stretch, to follow him. Every rustle of leaves was no longer ordinary. It was the breath of something alive, ancient, and hungry. The whispers had grown in intensity, merging into one vast, suffocating chorus that seemed to wrap around his mind. Ethan, you cannot leave. Then you are ours. He stumbled over a root and fell, scraping his hands and knees against the rough bark and soil. When he looked up, the forest around him had changed again. The trees were taller now, impossibly tall, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal arms. The air was thick, damp, and smelled of decay and wet earth. Shapes moved in the darkness between the trees, humanoid, but wrong, distorted, like reflections in a broken mirror. Ethan's flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock him. One of the figures stepped forward. It was Lily, or what she had become. Her body was elongated, limbs bending at impossible angles. Her eyes glowed faintly, white and hollow. She smiled, a twisted mockery of the friend he had known. Ethan, she whispered, voice warped and echoing, why didn't you stay with us? Ethan scrambled backward. It's not you. You're not real. She tilted her head, unnaturally, like a predator studying its prey. And then she lunged. But before she could reach him, the forest itself seemed to intervene. Roots burst from the ground, curling around her legs, pulling her back into the shadows. Her scream was cut short, and then she was gone. Ethan's heart pounded. He realized with a sickening certainty, the forest didn't just trap people, it changed them. Each friend he had lost had become part of the forest, twisted into something unrecognizable, their whispers now feeding the darkness. He ran again, faster, driven by pure fear. The trees seemed to close in, branches snapping like whips. Shadows moved on their own, forming shapes that resembled his friends, reaching out, laughing, begging, screaming. The whispers called his name constantly, merging with their distorted voices, pulling him toward an unknown destination. Ethan stumbled into a clearing, or at least he thought it was a clearing. The moonlight revealed a circle of stones, ancient and blackened, etched with symbols that seemed to crawl and shift when he stared too long. In the center, a figure crouched, tall, faceless, its limbs stretched impossibly. It exuded a sense of purpose, of hunger. This was the heart of the forest, the source of the whispers. They join us, become one. The figure moved closer, gliding silently, and Ethan backed away. The whispers became voices, overlapping. His friends, his family, strangers, all calling to him, coaxing, threatening, promising. His mind began to fracture under the weight of their sound. He covered his ears, screaming, but the voices were inside him now, inside his skull, echoing with every beat of his heart. Then he saw them, Marcus, Claire, Lily, lined up around the central figure, their faces blank, their bodies twisted, their eyes glowing like the heart of the forest itself. They reached out, beckoning him to come closer. Ethan shook his head violently. I won't. The forest reacted instantly. The ground beneath him shifted, opening into a pit lined with writhing roots that tried to grab his legs. The air thickened, shadows formed into hands, scraping, clawing at his skin. He felt teeth on his shoulder, nails on his back, but when he spun, nothing was there. Only the whispering. "You belong to us, you belong." Ethan ran toward the circle of stones, the central figure gliding closer, and he realized, if he didn't reach the stones, he would become one with the forest, lost forever as another whisper among the trees. He leaped onto the nearest stone, panting, bloodied, desperate. The ground trembled. Shadows surged like a tide, and the voices screamed in unison. One step, one step. He looked down. The stone beneath him was smooth, impossibly cold, almost alive. A vibration ran through it, and the whispers intensified, almost deafening now. The figure stepped closer, faceless, yet somehow knowing everything about him. It raised a long, thin arm, pointing directly at Ethan. "Do not resist." Ethan screamed and jumped, trying to reach another stone, but the gap was too wide. The forest surged around him, roots twisting, shadows lunging, whispers clawing into his mind. And then a voice, his own voice, twisted, mocking, joined the chorus. "You are ours." The world tilted. Ethan felt himself being pulled down not just by the forest, but by something older, stronger, hungrier. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him completely was the faceless figure, standing in the circle of stones, surrounded by the silent forms of his friends, whispering his name. Darkness enveloped Ethan completely. The forest had swallowed him whole, its whispers now a roaring tide inside his mind. He tried to fight, to struggle, to scream, but the sound never left his throat. The faceless figure in the stone circle had not moved. Instead, it seemed to pulse, expanding, breathing, alive in a way that defied logic. The whispers had multiplied. Every tree, every shadow, every root was speaking at once. Ethan heard every secret of the forest, countless souls trapped for centuries, their terror etched into the bark, their despair woven into the soil. And amidst the endless voices, he heard the faint echoes of his friends, distorted, twisted, pleading. "Help us." He stumbled forward, hands outstretched, desperate to reach them. The faceless figure raised its arms, and the air itself warped, bending toward Ethan. The trees seemed to stretch, their branches like elongated fingers, curling around him. Roots erupted from the ground, thick and black, writhing like serpents, aiming to trap him completely. Join us, forever." Ethan screamed again, flailing. His hands grabbed at roots, at shadows, anything to stop the pull of the forest, but it was useless. The whispers drilled into his mind, showing him visions of endless blackness, of screams without end, of faces like his friends twisted into monstrous forms. And then, a moment of clarity. Ethan realized that resistance might not save him, but understanding could. The forest wasn't just hungry for flesh, it craved identity, memories, names. That was how it trapped its victims, by swallowing their essence and twisting it into the chorus of whispers. He had to act fast to survive. With every ounce of willpower, Ethan forced himself to speak. "I think them." "Ethan." His voice rang out, defiant, breaking through the roar of the whispers. The faceless figure paused, the shadows shivered, and the roots recoiled slightly. The forest pulsed angrily, testing him. "You belong. I belong to me." Ethan yelled, teeth clenched, eyes wide with desperation. He realized he had to leave the circle of stones. If the forest couldn't claim him physically, it would try to consume his identity, but he could resist by asserting his own name, his own essence, over theirs. Step by step, he forced himself forward, ignoring the tendrils of roots and the grasping shadows. Every whispered plea of his friends clawed at him, but he blocked them out, repeating, "I am Ethan. I am Ethan. I am Ethan." The forest fought back, bending reality, creating illusions of his friends reaching out to him, screaming for help, but he kept moving. Finally, he reached the edge of the circle. The faceless figure loomed closer, black as void, endless, but it could not follow him beyond the stones. With one final scream of defiance, Ethan leaped over the edge and ran. The ground beneath him seemed unstable, the shadows stretching to grasp him, but he kept repeating his name like a mantra, a shield against the forest's hunger. He broke through a tangle of branches and collapsed at the edge of the forest, gasping, bleeding, trembling. The whispers continued, faint now, echoing from the depths of the trees, but they were distant, powerless. He had escaped for now. But as he looked back at the shadowed treeline, Ethan saw the faintest movement, the trees swaying unnaturally as if breathing. And in the darkest corners he thought he saw them, his friends, standing silently, watching him, their eyes empty, voices now part of the forest forever. Ethan knew he had survived, but the forest had left its mark. At night, in his dreams, he heard whispers, soft, coaxing, calling his name. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the forest was waiting, patient and eternal, for the day it could reclaim what was always its. We are waiting. He could never truly leave the whispering forest,